He ordered in ancient Arabic to test her. The waitress replied like a scholar and froze the room. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Let's dive right into today's story. In the bustling heart of New York City, a place where the elite dined in luxury and whispered secrets across polished tables, there was a waitress who wasn't at all what she seemed. Grace was her name, a quiet young woman who had learned the art of invisibility. She moved like a shadow between the tables of the high-end restaurant, her black uniform impeccable, her demeanor polite but distant. To the customers, she was just another face behind the serving tray, their eyes never pausing to truly see her. But in reality, Grace was anything but ordinary. She had a background no one could imagine, a quiet intellect that had been hidden beneath the apron she wore. Grace had studied linguistics, mastering ancient languages that most people had never even heard of. She knew languages like Latin, ancient Greek, and even the intricate dialects of Arabic that went back thousands of years. Yet, here she was, waiting tables, her talents locked away. As she walked through the busy dining room, she couldn't help but overhear snippets of conversation. The usual chatter of business tycoons, celebrities, and investors discussing deals, stocks, and power plays. They didn't know it, but Grace had once been part of a world like theirs, a world of prestige and knowledge. That was until a personal tragedy forced her to step away from her dreams and live a life that was far less glamorous. Her mind, however, was always sharp, always alert. One evening, as she approached table 7 to take an order, she saw a man sitting alone, his back straight, his tailored suit catching the light just right. He was someone important, someone powerful, but Grace knew better than to show any interest. It was a silent rule she had learned long ago: never draw attention to yourself. The man looked up, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth, but there was something in his eyes, something calculating, as though he had already sized her up. He spoke first, his voice low and measured. I'd like the steak, medium rare, but I'll have it served in a manner most exotic. He paused, watching her closely. Could you understand ancient Arabic? The challenge hung in the air, sharp and unexpected. Grace blinked, a flicker of surprise crossing her face before she masked it with a neutral expression. This man wasn't here for a regular dinner. He wasn't here to enjoy a meal. He was here to test her. She didn't say a word at first, letting the silence stretch between them. Then, in a calm voice, she replied, Of course, sir. I can understand ancient Arabic. Would you like me to confirm your order in the language? His eyes narrowed, amusement dancing behind them. He leaned back in his chair, watching her closely, clearly testing the waters. Yes, he said with a smirk. Please proceed. And so Grace did. She spoke the words in perfect ancient Arabic, the language flowing from her lips as though it were the most natural thing in the world. Her words were deliberate, clear, and precise. She repeated the order, describing the food, the drink, and the setting, all in the ancient tongue that had been dormant in the world for centuries. The room fell silent. The other diners, once engaged in their own conversations, now turned their attention to the woman who had just spoken a language most had only heard about in dusty history books. The man's smirk faltered as his eyes widened, the challenge he had posed now backfiring in the most unexpected way. He leaned forward, his interest piqued. Grace continued with the order, her voice steady, betraying none of the emotions that swirled within her. She had not only met his challenge, but had done so in a way that left him speechless. As the words left her mouth, she felt the weight of the room shift. The eyes of the diners, the staff, the very atmosphere in the restaurant, it all seemed to freeze. Grace had never wanted to be the center of attention, but tonight, her brilliance couldn't be ignored. The man, clearly taken aback, could only manage a soft chuckle as he finally spoke. Well, I didn't expect that. You're far more than just a waitress, aren't you? Grace smiled politely, but inside, she knew that this was only the beginning. She had proven her worth, but the real test was yet to come. Grace turned and walked away from the table, her heart still racing from the strange encounter. The man's surprise had been palpable, his casual demeanor cracking for just a moment. She tried to shake off the feeling of being the center of attention as she headed back to the kitchen. The last thing she needed was to become a spectacle in a place that had always been a sanctuary for her quiet existence. The kitchen was bustling with activity, as usual. The clatter of pots and pans, the sizzling of meat on the grill, and the low hum of the staff filling the air. Grace took a deep breath, adjusting her apron, and focused on the task at hand. She had to get back into the rhythm of her work, the one thing that grounded her. It was just another night, just another table, and she had to keep moving. As the night wore on, Grace found herself stealing glances at the man in the corner of her eye. He wasn't what she had expected either. His sharp suit and confident aura spoke of someone who controlled everything around him, but his eyes, those eyes, were filled with an unfamiliar curiosity. The way he had watched her, not in judgment, but in genuine interest, had caught her off guard. She could almost feel him watching her every move, not as a server, but as a person. It was a strange sensation, and one she wasn't sure how to process. The night dragged on, and as the final orders were taken and the last glass of wine was poured, Grace had a moment to breathe. She leaned against the counter, her mind still buzzing. The moment with the man was still fresh, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like something more than just a waitress. A sudden voice cut through her thoughts. "You're impressive, you know that." Grace turned to see the man from earlier standing just behind her. His tone was casual, but there was something in the way he spoke that made her feel like he wasn't just making small talk. "I didn't expect you to actually speak ancient Arabic," he continued, his gaze steady. "It's not every day you find someone who can not only understand the language, but use it so effortlessly." Grace froze for a moment, unsure how to respond. She had expected him to forget about her the moment he finished his meal. But there he was, standing before her, still intrigued by what he had witnessed. "I told you, I can understand it," she said, trying to keep her voice neutral, professional. "But you didn't just understand it. You spoke it like you've studied it for years. Most people couldn't do that. And I'm guessing you didn't just learn it for fun." His eyes narrowed slightly, studying her. She felt a flush creep up her neck. It wasn't like her to reveal too much about herself. Her life had always been about blending in, staying out of the spotlight. But something about this man made her feel like he could see through all the layers she had carefully built up. "I studied it," Grace said quietly, "a long time ago. But life took me in another direction." The words were out before she could stop them, and she instantly regretted it. She could see the curiosity in his eyes, but she wasn't about to spill her story to a stranger, no matter how rich or powerful he might be. "Another direction?" he repeated, his voice gentle now. "What happened?" She shook her head, stepping back slightly. "It's not important," she said, her voice firm. "I'm just a waitress now, trying to make ends meet." He didn't press her, but she could tell that he wasn't convinced. His gaze lingered on her for a moment longer, and then, as if making a decision, he spoke again. "I think you could do more than this. I think you're wasting your potential here." Grace felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She was used to people thinking they knew what was best for her, but this felt different. This man, with all his wealth and power, was offering her something she hadn't even considered in years, an escape from the life she had been living. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I mean," he said, stepping closer, "that you could be so much more than this. You could work for me. I need someone who thinks outside the box, someone with the kind of mind you have. Someone who doesn't just follow orders, but challenges the status quo." Grace stared at him, her mind racing. Was he serious? Did he really think she had the skills to work with someone like him? The thought of stepping into the world of high-powered executives, of strategy meetings and million-dollar deals, made her feel like a fish out of water. But a part of her, a part she hadn't allowed to surface in a long time, felt a stirring of hope. I'm not sure I'm what you're looking for," she said, her voice faltering for the first time. "You don't know what I'm looking for," he said, his tone softening. "But I do know that you have something rare, something most people don't even realize they have. I want to see what you can do. What if I offered you a job? Not as a waitress, but as an advisor, someone who can guide me through things I don't understand." Grace swallowed hard. She had dreamed of this kind of opportunity, of working in a world where her intellect wasn't dismissed, where her knowledge wasn't wasted. But she had to be sure. "What would I be advising you on?" she asked, already knowing the answer. "I need someone who can help me with investments," he said, his voice steady. Someone who can see patterns, who can predict trends. Someone like you. Grace hesitated, the weight of his words sinking in. Could she really step into this world, leave behind the life she had known for so long? Or would it be too much for her to handle? But as she looked into his eyes, she knew one thing. This was a chance. A chance she couldn't let slip away. Grace stood in the corner of the kitchen, her heart pounding as the words hung in the air between her and the man who had just offered her a life she never imagined. She could hardly believe it. A job as an advisor? To a billionaire? It seemed like a dream, a life she had buried long ago, and now, here it was, offered on a silver platter. But she couldn't shake the feeling of doubt creeping in. Was this some sort of joke? Or was it real? I know it's a lot to take in, Jack said, his voice steady and calm, as though offering her the opportunity to work with him was the most natural thing in the world. But I see something in you, Grace. Something that the people I have around me don't have. She looked at him, her thoughts swirling. Could she really step into this world? The world of high finance, where billions were made and lost in the blink of an eye. A world where her every decision could change the course of companies, and maybe even the world. She had spent years hiding her talents, working in the shadows, keeping her intellect to herself. Now, the opportunity to use it in ways she had never imagined was staring her in the face. But why me? Grace asked, her voice barely above a whisper. There are so many people who are more qualified than I am. People with degrees from Ivy League schools, with decades of experience in this field. Why would you choose someone like me? Jack leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. Because I don't need someone who just follows the rules. I need someone who can think outside the box, someone who can challenge the status quo, someone who's not afraid to speak up, even when the stakes are high. And you, Grace, you've got that. His words hit her like a wave, knocking the wind out of her. She had never thought of herself as someone who could change the world. She had always been content with her quiet life, the one where she could remain invisible, unnoticed. But now, here was someone telling her that she could make a difference. Could she really do it? Could she step into a world where every decision mattered, where her every move would be scrutinized by the most powerful people in the world? She took a deep breath, trying to calm the racing thoughts in her mind. I don't know, she said slowly. It's just so much to take in. I never thought I'd be offered something like this. Jack smiled, a genuine smile that made Grace's heart flutter. I get it. It's a big step, but I'm not asking you to make a decision right away. Take your time. Think about it. I'm giving you the freedom to decide what you want. Grace nodded, still unsure of what to do. The thought of leaving her current life behind, of stepping into a world that felt so foreign, terrified her. But at the same time, the thought of staying in the same routine, of never pushing herself beyond what she knew, made her feel empty. She had always wanted more. More than the quiet life of a waitress. More than the limitations she had placed on herself. But was she ready to take the leap? I don't know if I can do this, she admitted, her voice trembling. I'm not sure I'm the right person for this job. Jack's expression softened, and he stood up, walking over to where she stood. You don't have to have all the answers right now, he said, his voice low and reassuring. But I see something in you, Grace. Something that no one else does. And that's why I'm offering you this chance. The rest is up to you. Grace stood there for a long moment, her mind whirling. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her. This was more than just a job offer. It was a chance to change her life, to do something she had never imagined possible. But it was also terrifying. She had always played it safe, kept to the shadows. But now, the spotlight was on her, and she didn't know if she was ready for it. Finally, she took a deep breath and looked at Jack. I'll think about it, she said, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. I'll let you know. Jack smiled, a look of understanding in his eyes. Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready. As he walked away, Grace stood there, feeling the weight of his words. This was it. The moment that could change everything. And she had no idea what to do next. Grace walked out of the restaurant late that night, the city lights of New York flickering like stars above her. She had stayed for hours after her shift ended, her mind racing with the decision she had to make. Jack's offer echoed in her thoughts, louder than the sounds of the bustling streets around her. Could she really take that step? Could she leave behind everything she knew, everything that had become so familiar, and dive into something so uncertain? She had spent years building walls, hiding who she truly was from the world. And now, Jack was asking her to tear them all down. He saw something in her, something she had buried deep inside. But could she trust him? Could she trust herself? Grace's phone buzzed in her pocket, and she pulled it out to see a message from Jack. Just checking in. Take your time. But remember, I'm here if you need anything. The message was brief, but it made her pause. He wasn't pressuring her, just offering support. For some reason, that made it harder. It would have been easier if he had been demanding or aggressive, but his calm, genuine nature made her second-guess her hesitations. She stopped walking for a moment, standing beneath the glow of a street lamp, her fingers tapping nervously on the screen as she thought about her response. She didn't know what she wanted, but she did know one thing. This wasn't just about a job offer. This was about reclaiming a part of herself that had been lost. Grace had always been the quiet one, the one who stayed in the background. But inside, she had always been capable of more. She had spent years suppressing her ambitions, telling herself that it was easier to live a quiet, uneventful life. But now, faced with an opportunity she had never dreamed possible, she had to confront the truth. She could no longer hide behind her apron, behind the walls she had carefully constructed. She needed to decide if she was ready to step into the light. The subway ride home felt like an eternity, her mind racing through every scenario. What would her life look like if she took the job? What would it mean for her future? And what would it mean for the people she cared about? She had always kept her distance from the world of high society. It was easy to tell herself that it was all superficial, that the people who lived in those circles were not like her. But now, she was being offered a chance to be a part of that world, to have a voice in a space where she had always been silent. When she finally reached her apartment, she locked the door behind her and collapsed onto the couch, exhausted. Her small, modest space was a far cry from the luxurious offices Jack worked in, but it was hers. The walls were filled with photographs of family and friends, reminders of the life she had built in this city. She had worked hard to make this life, to create a semblance of normalcy, but now, she wasn't sure if it was enough. She stared at the empty room, the quiet settling in. This was the moment of truth. Could she really leave everything behind? The thought of losing her independence, of entering a world where everything was new and unfamiliar, was terrifying. But deep down, she knew she couldn't stay hidden forever. She had always wanted more, always dreamed of being part of something bigger. The only thing holding her back was fear, and that was something she had always struggled with. The fear of failure, the fear of not being good enough, the fear of stepping into a world that might never accept her. But as she sat there, the weight of Jack's offer pressing down on her, something inside her began to shift. She realized that the only way to grow, to move forward, was to take risks, to let go of the safe life she had created and embrace the unknown. It was time to stop hiding. She had spent too long in the shadows. The world was waiting for her to step into it. And maybe, just maybe, this job with Jack was the opportunity she needed to finally become the person she had always known she could be. Grace stood up from the couch and walked to her window, looking out at the city that never stopped moving. The lights of Manhattan twinkled in the distance, a reminder that the world was full of possibilities. She took a deep breath, her decision finally made. She would call Jack tomorrow, and she would say yes. She didn't know exactly what the future held, but for the first time in years, she felt a spark of excitement. This was her chance to write her own story, and she wasn't going to let fear stop her anymore. Grace woke up the next morning with a sense of anticipation she hadn't felt in years. The decision was made. She had sent the message to Jack late last night, after hours of pacing around her small apartment, weighing the options. Her fingers hovered over the screen of her phone before she hit send. "I'm in," she had typed. "Let's talk about the details." The decision had been made. No turning back now. As the sunlight streamed through her window, Grace knew that today was going to be different. The rest of the world might still be waking up, but she was already on the verge of something huge, something that could change the entire course of her life. She glanced around her apartment, the one she had come to think of as both home and a reminder of all she had left behind. The simple furniture, the faded curtains, the small kitchen that always smelled of coffee and comfort. It had been enough for so long. But now, as she packed her bag and got ready to step into the world Jack had promised her, she realized just how much bigger the world was beyond these walls. Her phone buzzed again, and this time it was Jack. "Looking forward to meeting today." I'll have someone pick you up at 2 p.m. Get ready for something different, the message read. Her heart raced at the thought of what was coming. Jack had made it clear that the job he was offering wasn't going to be typical. She wasn't sure if she was ready for whatever something different meant, but she didn't have time to second-guess herself. She had already taken the first step, and there was no going back. The morning passed in a blur as Grace went through the motions, showering, getting dressed, and making a simple breakfast that she barely had time to eat. The minutes ticked by faster than she wanted, each second pulling her closer to the moment that would define the rest of her life. At exactly 2 p.m., she received a call from an unfamiliar number. She answered, her voice trembling slightly. "Grace," came the smooth, confident voice on the other end. "This is David, Mr. Anderson's chief of staff. I'm here to pick you up. We'll take you straight to the office." The words felt surreal. The office? She had imagined herself in a sleek, corporate environment, but hearing it spoken aloud made it feel real, made it feel like she was finally stepping into the life she had always dreamt of. Within minutes, a sleek black car pulled up outside her building. David greeted her with a smile, a firm handshake, and a courteous nod. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a dark suit, and radiated an aura of quiet authority. As they drove through the busy streets of Manhattan, Grace couldn't help but notice the stark contrast between her life and the world she was entering. The car was luxurious, its interior pristine, with soft leather seats and tinted windows that blocked out the noise of the city. David made small talk, but Grace could barely focus. Her mind was consumed by the enormity of what she was about to walk into. The building they arrived at was nothing short of breathtaking. Towering over the city, its sleek glass exterior reflected the sky, and as they entered, the modern lobby was filled with marble floors and art installations that screamed wealth. The atmosphere inside was cold, efficient, and polished, a stark contrast to the warmth and familiarity of the diner she had left behind. They took the elevator to the top floor, and as the doors opened, Grace was greeted by a panoramic view of the entire city. Her breath caught in her throat as she took in the sight. She had never seen anything like it. David led her into a large conference room where Jack was waiting. He was dressed in a sharp suit, his expression serious but welcoming. The moment she stepped inside, all eyes turned to her, and for the first time, she felt like she wasn't just invisible. Jack stood up from his chair and gestured for her to take a seat. "Grace," he said, his voice warm yet professional. "I'm glad you could make it. We're about to begin, but I want you to know something before we get started. You've earned your place here. I don't offer opportunities like this to just anyone." Grace swallowed hard, feeling both nervous and honored. She had no idea what this meeting would entail, but for the first time, she felt the weight of her potential. As the meeting began, Jack outlined his vision for the future, big plans, ambitious projects, and an unshakable belief that Grace could be a part of it all. He spoke about investments, strategies, and the world-changing decisions he was making, and Grace's mind raced to keep up. For a moment, she felt like an outsider, a small fish in an ocean of sharks. But as the conversation continued, she found herself contributing ideas, offering insights, and realizing that, for the first time, her knowledge was not just valuable, it was necessary. Jack smiled as she spoke, nodding along as if he had known all along that she would be able to keep up. As the meeting drew to a close, he turned to her, his gaze intense yet approving. "You're exactly what I've been looking for, Grace. This is just the beginning." The words hit her like a wave, and in that moment, she realized just how much had changed. She was no longer the quiet waitress at the back of the restaurant. She was Grace, a name that would soon carry weight in a world far beyond anything she had ever imagined. The weeks following Grace's meeting with Jack were a whirlwind. Each day felt like she was being swept into a world she barely understood, yet one she had always secretly longed to be part of. She quickly adapted to the fast-paced environment at Jack's company. The office was a sleek, modern space, filled with sharp minds and ambitious energy, yet it was different from the sterile corporate environments she had imagined. There was an energy here, a pulse that seemed to match her own growing excitement. Grace dove into her work with a level of intensity she hadn't known she was capable of. Jack's team of highly educated and experienced professionals were intrigued by her insights, and she began to feel her confidence grow. No longer just a waitress, She was now contributing valuable ideas and strategies. Her voice was heard in meetings, and her input was respected. Every time she spoke, it was as if the room listened a little more intently. It wasn't always easy. She often felt like an outsider, unsure of the complex jargon and financial terms being tossed around the table. But she pushed through, studying the reports, the market trends, and the numbers that once seemed like a foreign language. Slowly, she began to understand the intricacies of the business world. Jack, ever the mentor, encouraged her to keep going, to keep asking questions, and to trust her instincts. You have the mind of a strategist, Grace. You're not just a numbers person, you think in patterns. And that's exactly what we need, he told her one afternoon, as they sat across from each other in his glass-walled office overlooking the city. His words stuck with her, resonating deeply. She had never seen herself that way before. A strategist. Someone whose ideas could shift the course of a business. She was starting to believe it. But as her professional life took off, Grace found herself caught in a whirlwind of personal emotions she hadn't anticipated. She hadn't realized how isolated she would feel. She had left behind the small, comforting world of her former life, where she was known and understood, to step into a realm where everyone was just a little bit different. She missed the simple moments, sitting with friends at the diner, talking about nothing in particular, just existing in a world that didn't require her to be anyone other than herself. The luxury, the power, the excitement of the business world was exhilarating, but it was also lonely. She had no time for herself anymore. The long hours in the office left her with little energy to socialize. And Jack, while supportive, was always buried in work, as driven and obsessed with success as ever. One evening, after another long day at the office, Grace sat in her apartment, staring out at the skyline of Manhattan, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on her. She had achieved so much in such a short time, but at what cost? Was it worth it to live a life so full of ambition and success, yet so devoid of the warmth and simplicity she had once known? Her phone buzzed, breaking her thoughts. It was a text from Jack. I know this is a lot, but don't forget why you're here. You're making a difference. She stared at the screen, the words floating in front of her. She knew he was right. She had a chance to do something incredible here. She couldn't turn back now. But she also couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something was missing. Maybe it was time to start finding a balance between the two worlds. As she lay down that night, the city lights casting a soft glow through her window, Grace made a decision. She would continue her work, her new life, but she would also find a way to reconnect with the things that had always grounded her. She would reach out to old friends, perhaps visit the diner again, and maybe even take a weekend off. She wasn't sure what the future would look like, but for the first time in a long time, she was ready to embrace it fully. Grace had found herself in a new world, but she didn't have to lose herself in it. The journey was just beginning, and she was ready for whatever came next. Grace had been working at Jack's company for over a month now, and the novelty of it all still hadn't worn off. Every morning, she walked into the building with a sense of purpose, but also with an underlying feeling of awe. She had grown used to the fast pace, the high stakes, and the constant challenge. But there was something new stirring inside her, something she hadn't expected. She was beginning to like it. She had her own office now, a corner room with a view of the city that made her feel both small and powerful at the same time. The space was minimalist, sleek, but it was hers. The team was relying on her more, and she was beginning to realize just how much responsibility she held. Jack had been right. She did have the mind of a strategist. She was becoming a key player in the decisions that were shaping the company's future. Yet, even with all this success, Grace couldn't shake the nagging feeling of loneliness. The office was always buzzing with people, but she found herself still disconnected from the world outside. She barely had time to catch up with friends or even get in touch with her old life. The diner felt like a distant memory now. She missed the familiarity of it, the simplicity, the friendly faces of the regulars, the sound of plates clinking, the laughter echoing in the back room. But that world seemed far behind her now. She had stepped into something bigger, something that demanded her full attention. That evening, after a particularly exhausting day, Grace was sitting in her office, staring out at the city skyline. The office was empty now. Everyone else had left for the night. But Grace stayed behind, going over numbers, tweaking reports, and planning for the upcoming meeting. It had become a routine, one she had grown used to. Her phone buzzed, breaking her concentration. It was Jack, a simple message. Need to talk tomorrow. Be in the office early. Grace frowned, wondering what it was about. They had been in constant communication, but she had a feeling this conversation was going to be different. The next morning, she arrived at the office before the sun had fully risen. The building was still, quiet, and she felt the weight of the silence in the air. As she walked to her office, she found Jack waiting outside. He looked more serious than usual, his brow furrowed as he stared at his phone. "Morning," she greeted him, but he barely acknowledged her, his attention focused elsewhere. "Grace, we need to talk," Jack said, his voice steady but there was an edge to it. "I've been looking at the numbers, and there's something you need to know." He led her into the conference room, a room she had spent so many hours in, but today, it felt different. More intense. The lights were dim, and the giant table between them seemed to loom larger than usual. Grace took a seat, her stomach knotting with anticipation. "What's going on?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Jack sat down across from her, his expression unreadable. He slid a report across the table towards her. It was a set of projections, numbers, and forecasts she had worked on just a few weeks ago. "I need you to look at this closely," he said, his tone serious. Grace flipped open the report, scanning the figures. Her eyes immediately landed on something troubling. The numbers didn't add up. "What happened?" she asked, her heart sinking. Jack leaned forward, his eyes locking with hers. "It's not just about the numbers. It's about a bigger picture. We're at a crossroads, Grace. Some of the deals we've been pushing forward might not be as solid as we thought. We need a new strategy." Her mind raced. "Are you saying we've been making mistakes?" Jack's silence hung in the air like a heavy weight. Grace felt the pressure building. She had spent weeks working on these deals, her input valued, but now she was faced with the reality that things weren't as clear-cut as she had believed. "We need to course correct," Jack said finally, "and I need your help to do it. You're one of the few people here who can think outside the box, who isn't afraid to challenge conventional wisdom. I trust you, Grace." His words hit her like a rush of adrenaline. This was it. This was the moment she had been waiting for. Her chance to prove herself. The stakes were higher now, but so was her confidence. She glanced back at the report, her mind already working through the numbers, the patterns, the potential risks. This was what she had been training for, what she had worked so hard to prepare for. "Let's fix it," she said, her voice steady, her resolve clear. Jack smiled, a rare expression of appreciation. "I knew I made the right choice," he said, leaning back in his chair. "We'll work through it together. But we need to move fast. Time's running out." Grace nodded. As Jack walked out of the room, she remained seated, staring at the report. The weight of it all hit her again. But this time, she wasn't overwhelmed. She was ready. This was her moment to make a real impact, to show Jack and the world just what she was capable of. The old Grace, the waitress who had quietly observed the world, had long been left behind. The new Grace was a strategist, a decision-maker, someone who could reshape the future. And she wasn't going to let this chance slip away. The next few days were a blur for Grace. She dove headfirst into the numbers, working late into the night with her team, meticulously analyzing data, revising projections, and strategizing a new approach. Jack was right. This was her chance. As the pressure mounted, Grace began to realize just how much she had grown since stepping into this world. She had always been good with numbers, but now, she was thinking in ways that were more strategic, more forward-looking. She was no longer just following instructions, she was giving them. The atmosphere in the office had changed as well. There was a sense of urgency now, a shared understanding that they were all working towards something critical. The stakes had never been higher. As the hours passed, Grace began to feel more comfortable in her new role. Her confidence grew with each passing decision, and the respect she was earning from her colleagues was evident. No longer the outsider, she was becoming a valued member of the team. Jack noticed it too. He had always been encouraging, but now, his praise came more frequently, and with it, an added weight. "You're on the right track, Grace," he told her during one meeting. "You're seeing the patterns others miss. Keep pushing." But as much as she had embraced the challenges of her new job, Grace still couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The weight of the decisions she was making, the pressure to succeed, had begun to feel heavier than she had anticipated. She was no longer just working to build a career. She was working to reshape the future of a company, and that responsibility was something she couldn't take lightly. One evening, after another marathon session in the conference room, Grace found herself alone in the office, staring out at the city skyline. The office was quiet, the hum of the city below a stark contrast to the silence around her. She had grown used to the late nights, but tonight, something felt different. She wasn't sure if it was the exhaustion or the weight of the decisions she was making, but she couldn't shake the feeling of doubt. Was she really cut out for this? She had made it this far, but was she prepared for what was to come? The door to her office creaked open, and Jack stepped inside, a knowing look on his face. "You look like you could use a break," he said, his voice warm but serious. Grace smiled weakly. "I'm just trying to wrap my head around everything. It's a lot." Jack nodded, leaning against the doorframe. "I know, but you're handling it better than anyone I've seen. You're seeing things others miss. That's what makes you invaluable to this company." Grace appreciated his words, but they didn't quite ease the doubts she had. She had worked so hard to get here, but now that she was here, she wasn't sure if she was ready for the responsibility. "I just don't want to make a mistake," she admitted. "I'm doing everything I can, but what if it's not enough?" Jack walked over to her desk and placed a hand on the edge of it, leaning in slightly. "Grace, let me tell you something. No one is ever ready for this kind of responsibility. I wasn't when I started either. But I learned, and I grew. And I'm still learning. What matters is your ability to adapt, to face the challenges head on. You've done that from day one. You're doing it now." Grace looked at him, her mind still spinning, but his words carried a weight that made her feel just a little more at ease. Jack was right. No one was ever truly ready for the challenges that came with this kind of work. But that didn't mean she couldn't rise to meet them. She had come this far, and she couldn't let fear hold her back now. "Thank you, Jack," she said quietly, finally allowing herself to relax a little. "I needed to hear that." Jack gave her a reassuring smile. "Anytime, Grace. I know you've got what it takes." As Jack left her office, Grace sat back in her chair, feeling the weight of his words settle over her. The doubt was still there, lurking in the back of her mind, but now it was accompanied by something else, determination. She had earned her place here, and she wasn't going to let fear stop her from reaching her full potential. The next morning, Grace walked into the office with a renewed sense of purpose. The pressure was still there, but it no longer felt suffocating. She was ready to face whatever came next. She had made it this far, and now it was time to prove, not just to Jack, but to herself, that she could handle whatever challenges the future held. As the day went on, Grace found herself at the center of more important decisions. Her insights were starting to shape the direction of the company, and she was beginning to feel the weight of her role. But now, it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a challenge she was ready to take on. By the end of the day, Grace knew that this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be filled with obstacles, but she was no longer afraid. She was ready for whatever came next. Grace had made it through the toughest weeks of her life. The whirlwind of meetings, deals, and high expectations had become her new reality, and she was adapting to it better than she ever imagined. Jack's faith in her had pushed her to new heights, and she was beginning to see herself not just as the outsider, but as an integral part of the team. She was no longer just contributing, she was leading. But as much as she had embraced her success, the weight of it all began to sink in. The deals they had been pushing for were nearing their final stages, and the pressure was mounting. There were days when Grace barely had time to think, let alone breathe. Yet, despite the chaos, there was something exhilarating about it. She was no longer playing small. She was taking risks, making decisions that could change the course of the company's future, and for the first time, she felt like she was truly in control of her destiny. One afternoon, after an especially intense meeting, Jack called her into his office. He was standing by the window, looking out over the city with his usual serious expression. Grace hesitated for a moment before stepping inside, her heart racing. "Have a seat," Jack said, gesturing to the chair in front of his desk. Grace sat down, trying to maintain her composure, though she could feel the tension building. Jack turned to face her, his gaze intense. "I've been impressed with your progress," he began, his voice low and steady. "You've handled the pressure better than most people would have. But I think we're about to face our biggest challenge yet." Grace's heart skipped a beat. She had been expecting something like this. There had been signs of trouble in some of the markets they had been targeting, and it was clear that Jack was preparing her for the next big hurdle. "What's the challenge?" she asked, trying to sound calm, though she could feel the weight of his words. Jack walked over to his desk and opened a folder, pulling out a set of documents. We've got some competition from a major player in the market. Their bid is aggressive, and they've already started undercutting our prices. We need to respond quickly, or we risk losing our edge. Grace's mind raced as she read through the figures on the paper. The numbers didn't lie. This was a serious threat. How do you want to respond? She asked, already brainstorming ideas in her head. Jack sat down across from her, his hands folded in front of him. I want to make a move that will surprise them, he said, his tone confident. We have the resources, the talent, and the strategy. But we need someone who can think outside the box, someone who isn't afraid to take risks. Someone like you. Grace blinked, surprised by his words. You want me to lead this? She asked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. Jack nodded. Yes. You've shown time and again that you have the ability to see the big picture. I trust you with this. The words hung in the air between them, and for a moment, Grace felt the weight of the responsibility crashing down on her. This wasn't just another decision. This was a make-or-break moment for the company. If she failed, it could cost them everything. But if she succeeded, it could be her defining moment. I won't let you down, she said, her voice steady despite the uncertainty inside her. Jack gave her a small smile. I know you won't. Grace spent the next few days diving into the project with everything she had. She pored over market trends, competitor analysis, and customer data, trying to find a way to beat the competition at their own game. It was exhausting, but she loved it. The thrill of problem solving, of finding a way to turn the odds in their favor, pushed her forward. But there were moments when the pressure felt overwhelming. The stakes were higher than ever, and the fear of failure gnawed at her. One night, as she stayed late in the office, poring over the final numbers, she felt the weight of it all. She stood up, stretching her tired muscles, and walked over to the window. The city below was alive with lights, but she felt strangely isolated. The life she had known seemed so distant now, a world she could barely remember. She was a part of something much bigger now, but at times, it felt like she was losing herself in the process. The door to her office opened, and Jack walked in. His presence was a comfort, but also a reminder of the expectations he had placed on her. How's it going? He asked, his voice casual, though she could see the concern in his eyes. Grace turned to face him, her mind still racing. It's going, she said, trying to sound confident. But it's a lot. I'm not sure I can keep up with all of it. Jack took a few steps toward her, his expression softening. You're doing great, he said, his voice low. But I can see you're tired. You don't have to do this alone. Grace looked at him, surprised by his words. I appreciate that, Jack, she said quietly. But I can't afford to stop now. This is too important. Jack nodded, his gaze steady. I know. But just remember, you don't have to carry all of this weight on your own. We're a team, and I believe in you. His words hit her harder than she expected. She had been so focused on proving herself, on carrying the weight of this responsibility, that she had forgotten what it meant to be part of a team. She had people who cared about her, who believed in her. And for the first time, she felt the pressure ease just a little. Thanks, she said, her voice soft. I won't forget that. Jack smiled, giving her a nod. You've got this, Grace. Just take a breath when you need to. We're in this together. As he left the room, Grace stood by the window, looking out at the city once more. The weight of the challenge ahead was still there, but now, she felt a little less alone. She was ready to face the challenge head-on, knowing that she wasn't in this alone. The future was uncertain, but with the support of her team, she knew she could handle whatever came next. Grace had a long night ahead of her. The project Jack had entrusted her with was moving forward at a rapid pace, and the closer they got to the finish line, the more intense the pressure became. But she was determined, more determined than she had ever been before. She sat in her office, the soft glow of her desk lamp casting a faint shadow over the papers in front of her. The deadline was looming, and the competition was breathing down their necks. Grace had put everything she had into the analysis, the reports, and the strategy. She had spent sleepless nights fine-tuning every detail. The pressure to succeed weighed heavily on her, but she couldn't afford to let up now. Jack had placed his trust in her, and she was going to prove him right. The sound of footsteps outside her office door brought her back to the present. Jack stepped inside, his usual confident demeanor slightly softened by the fatigue of the long hours they had both been working. "How's it going?" he asked, his voice calm. But there was a sharpness behind his words. Grace looked up from the papers, offering a faint smile. "It's going well," she said, though she could feel the exhaustion creeping up on her. "Everything's on track. I just need to finish up a few more details." Jack walked over to her desk, his eyes scanning the reports scattered in front of her. "You've done a great job," he said, his tone sincere. "We wouldn't be where we are without your input. But I need you to do something for me." Grace raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" Jack paused for a moment, looking out the window at the city skyline. "I need you to take a break." The words caught her off guard. "Take a break? With everything on the line, with so much still left to do?" "Jack, I can't afford to take a break right now," Grace replied, her voice filled with the kind of determination she had grown accustomed to. "I'm almost done. I just need a little more time." Jack turned to face her, his expression serious. "Grace, you're pushing yourself too hard. I know you want to do everything perfectly, but you need to take care of yourself. If you burn out, this whole thing could fall apart." Grace felt a knot tighten in her chest. She knew he was right. The past few weeks had been a blur, and she hadn't taken a moment to breathe. The work was consuming her, and she had lost sight of everything else. "I can't afford to stop now," she said quietly. "I've come this far. I can't let it all slip away." Jack's gaze softened. He walked over to her and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Grace, this isn't just about the work. You've done everything you can, and now, you need to trust yourself. Trust the team. You don't have to do this alone." The words struck her deeply. She had been so focused on proving herself, on doing everything right, that she had forgotten the most important part of success: teamwork. She had surrounded herself with people who believed in her, who supported her, but she had been too stubborn to lean on them. "I don't know if I can," Grace admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack smiled. "I know you can, and I know you will." For the first time in weeks, Grace allowed herself to relax. She leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes for a moment. The weight of the world had been on her shoulders, but Jack's words reminded her that she didn't have to carry it all alone. "Thank you," she said softly. Jack nodded, his smile warm. "You've got this. Now go home, get some rest. We'll finish this together." Grace stood up, feeling the exhaustion in her muscles, but also a sense of relief she hadn't realized she needed. She had come so far, and now, she knew that she didn't have to do it all on her own. She could lean on the team, on Jack, and on herself. She was ready to face whatever came next. As she left the office, she took one last look at the city below. The lights of Manhattan stretched out before her, a reminder of everything she had worked for. She had come a long way from the quiet waitress at the diner. She was no longer just a passive observer of the world around her. She was an active participant, a force to be reckoned with. The journey wasn't over, but for the first time, Grace felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. She was ready to take on whatever came next. The following days were a turning point for Grace. After Jack had pushed her to take a step back and rest, she realized how close she had been to burning out. The pressure had been relentless, and while she had thrived on it, the quiet moments of reflection were a necessary reset. She had allowed herself to slow down, to take time away from the office, and it gave her a new perspective on everything. When she returned to work, she found herself more focused, more creative, and more willing to delegate. She no longer felt like she had to carry the weight of the world on her own shoulders. Jack's words had stuck with her. Trust yourself, trust the team. The next phase of their project was upon them. The competition had escalated, and Grace knew that their strategy needed to change. The other company was relentless, their offers seemingly too good to pass up, but Grace had an idea, a way to turn things around. She stayed late one night, alone in the office, going over numbers and projections. Something clicked, and she began to formulate a new plan. She would leverage the strengths of their existing partnerships and combine them in a way that the competition wouldn't expect. She spent the next few days working with her team, fine-tuning the proposal, and presenting it to Jack. When she walked into his office with the new strategy, she was nervous. But she had come a long way from the uncertain woman she had once been. Jack looked up from his desk, his gaze steady but curious. "What do you have for me?" he asked. Grace set the papers down in front of him and began explaining. She laid out the plan, step by step, her confidence growing as she spoke. The more she described the strategy, the more she realized how much she had evolved. Jack listened intently, nodding occasionally, his eyes never leaving hers. When she finished, there was a brief silence. "This could work," Jack said finally, his voice thoughtful. "It's bold, but I like it." Grace smiled, the weight she had been carrying easing just a little. It felt good to have her ideas validated, to know that the work she was doing was having an impact. Jack stood up, walked over to the window, and looked out at the city below. "We need to move quickly," he said. "This could be the breakthrough we need." As they moved forward with the new plan, Grace found herself at the center of every decision. The team turned to her for advice, and Jack relied on her instincts more than ever. It was a strange feeling, knowing that she was the one people looked to for answers. She had always been in the background, but now, she was in the spotlight. And she was thriving. As the days passed, the plan began to take shape. Grace felt the excitement build with every meeting, every discussion, and every update. The competition was fierce, but they were ahead, and Grace was more confident than ever that they were going to win this. Yet, the pressure never truly went away. There was always something more to do, something else to fix, and with the success came new challenges. Jack was as driven as ever, and while his support for Grace never wavered, he was demanding. But this was the life she had chosen, the life she had fought for. She couldn't let herself falter now. One evening, after an intense meeting, Grace found herself standing by the window of her office again. The city lights sparkled in the distance, and she took a deep breath, letting the stillness of the moment wash over her. She had come so far, and yet, she knew this was only the beginning. Jack's faith in her had led her here, but now it was her own belief in herself that was driving her forward. She was no longer the quiet waitress, hidden in the shadows. She was a force to be reckoned with, and the world was finally starting to see that. As she turned away from the window, her phone buzzed on her desk. It was a message from Jack. "You've done good work, Grace. Keep it up." A smile tugged at her lips. Those words, simple as they were, meant everything to her. She had earned Jack's respect, and she had earned her place here. The next day, as the team moved forward with the final stages of the plan, Grace felt a sense of calm settle over her. She was ready for whatever came next. She had learned so much, and she knew that she was only getting started. With each passing day, she was becoming more and more the person she had always been meant to be, a leader, a strategist, someone who could change the world. And she wasn't going to stop now. The tension in the office was palpable as Grace and her team finalized the last details of their strategy. With the competition closing in and the clock ticking, they were about to make the move that would either secure their place at the top or send them spiraling into defeat. Grace felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her, but she had no time for hesitation. Her instincts were sharp, and every decision she had made up until this point had been the right one. She couldn't afford to second-guess herself now. The hours flew by in a blur of meetings, revisions, and last-minute adjustments. Jack was more focused than ever, overseeing the final steps, but it was clear that he trusted Grace completely. She was the one pulling the strings, guiding the team through the final stages of their ambitious plan. It felt surreal. Just a few months ago, she had been a quiet waitress, working in the background, blending in with the crowd. Now, she was at the forefront of a major business decision that could change everything. As the final meeting of the day began, Grace stood at the head of the conference table, looking around at the team that had become her family in this fast-paced world. They were all watching her, waiting for her lead, and for the first time, she felt truly ready. "Okay, everyone," she began, her voice steady and confident. "We've worked too hard to let this slip away now. This is the plan. We move forward with the proposal, but we adjust the timeline to take advantage of our biggest strength, our existing partnerships." The team nodded, taking in her words. Grace continued, outlining the details of the strategy they had spent so many late nights perfecting. She could see the respect in their eyes, the recognition of how far she had come. There was no turning back now. She had become the leader she never imagined she could be. After the meeting, as the team dispersed to put the final pieces into place, Grace sat alone in her office, staring out at the city. It was an odd feeling, the quiet after the storm of activity. She was about to send the proposal out to the investors, and everything depended on how they responded. Her mind raced, but she forced herself to take a deep breath. She had done everything she could. She had been through the fire, and now it was out of her hands. Her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. It was a message from Jack. "Grace, I'm proud of you. No matter what happens, you've already proven your worth. She read the message twice, the words settling in her chest like a warm reassurance. Jack had always believed in her, even when she hadn't believed in herself. But now, she knew he was right. She had proven her worth. She had become someone who could shape the future, someone who could stand shoulder to shoulder with the best in the business world. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of anticipation. Grace waited for the investor's response, and every moment felt like an eternity. She had gone from feeling like an outsider to being the key decision-maker, and now, the weight of that responsibility was finally sinking in. Jack checked in with her often, his support unwavering, but he was busy with other projects as well. He had given her the reins, and now it was time to see if she could hold on to them. Then, one morning, the call came. The investors had agreed to their terms. The deal was done. Grace sat at her desk, her hands trembling as she read through the confirmation email. It was real. The company had secured the future they had been working toward, and she had played a pivotal role in making it happen. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the email in disbelief. This was the moment she had worked for, the moment she had dreamed of. She had taken the leap, and it had paid off. Her mind raced as she thought of all the obstacles she had overcome to get here. She had faced doubts, both from others and from herself, but she had never given up. She had trusted her instincts, pushed through the fear, and now, she was reaping the rewards. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts, and she looked up to see Jack standing in the doorway, a smile on his face. "Well done, Grace," he said, his voice warm with pride. "You did it." Grace stood up, feeling a swell of emotion rising in her chest. "We did it," she corrected him, her voice filled with gratitude. Jack walked over to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "No, Grace. You did this. You led this team through one of the toughest challenges we've faced. You proved yourself, and then some." Grace felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had come so far, and now, it was all starting to fall into place. The journey wasn't over, not by a long shot, but this victory was hers. It was the first of many, and she was ready for whatever came next. As she looked out the window at the city that had become her new home, she felt a sense of pride that she had never known before. The world was full of challenges, but she had faced them head-on, and she had come out on top. She had truly found her place, and for the first time, she was excited for the future. The weeks following the successful deal felt like a turning point in Grace's life. The high of victory was still fresh, but it was quickly tempered by the realization that this was only the beginning. She had reached a level of success she hadn't thought possible, but now, the real challenge lay ahead, maintaining it, pushing further, and ensuring the success was not just a fluke. As Grace sat in her office one morning, reviewing the final details of their upcoming projects, she couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. The quiet, unassuming waitress from the diner was now leading major initiatives, making decisions that affected the company's future. Yet, despite the confidence she had gained, there were moments when she felt a lingering doubt. Could she keep up the pace? Would the company continue to thrive, and would her leadership remain as strong as it had been so far? Jack had been more than a mentor throughout this journey. He had been a constant source of encouragement and trust. He had given her the reins and had allowed her to prove herself. But now, she was starting to realize that the real work wasn't just about executing strategies. It was about vision, seeing what others couldn't see, anticipating what was coming, and making decisions that would keep the company ahead of the curve. One day, after a meeting that had stretched into the evening, Jack asked Grace to join him for a walk. The night air was cool as they stepped outside, the city lights twinkling around them. It was a moment of calm amidst the usual chaos of their work. "I've been watching you, Grace," Jack began, his voice steady but filled with admiration. "You've made remarkable strides in a very short time. But I want you to understand something. Success isn't just about the numbers. It's about the people, the relationships we build, the trust we foster, the culture we create. That's what lasts." Grace nodded, processing his words. It was something she hadn't fully considered until now. She had been so focused on the strategy, the deals, and the bottom line, that she had almost forgotten about the human element of it all. "I've learned a lot from you, Jack," she said, her voice soft but sincere. "Not just about business, but about leadership, about what it takes to truly build something sustainable." Jack gave a small smile, his gaze reflecting a mix of pride and understanding. You've done more than just learn, Grace. You've stepped into the role. And it's not just about what you do for the company. It's about what you inspire in others. The words hit her in a way she wasn't prepared for. She had been so focused on her own growth, her own success, that she hadn't realized the impact she was having on the team. She had become a leader not just by the work she did, but by how she inspired those around her. It was a humbling realization. As the weeks turned into months, Grace continued to lead with confidence. But now, she understood the deeper meaning of leadership. It wasn't just about making the right decisions. It was about creating an environment where others could thrive, where they felt supported and empowered to do their best work. The company continued to grow, and with each success, Grace's belief in herself grew stronger. She knew she had earned her place, but she also knew that the work wasn't finished. There would always be challenges ahead, and the key to overcoming them was staying true to the values that had gotten her here: hard work, integrity, and a commitment to those around her. One day, as Grace sat at her desk, reviewing a proposal for an upcoming venture, she paused for a moment and looked out the window. The city below was bustling with life, full of possibilities. She had come a long way, but there was still so much to do. And for the first time, she felt at peace with that. She didn't have all the answers, but she was learning, growing, and evolving every day. As her phone buzzed with a message from Jack, she smiled to herself. "You did great today," the message read. "But remember, the best is yet to come." Grace replied with a simple, "Thank you." It was more than just a message. It was a reminder that no matter how far she had come, there was always room to grow. She was ready. Ready for the challenges, ready for the triumphs, and ready to lead her team to new heights. The journey was far from over, and for the first time in her life, Grace knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be.